Hello, welcome back. So I've been busy doing various bits and pieces, not so much on the layout itself, but additional buildings and stuff that have been constructed, and going to take a look at those in this video. As always, at the end, if you've got any questions, comments, drop them down in the comment section, and look forward to reading those and answering what I can. So I've got the change of gauge shed and its corrugated add-on, and also as well where the brewery would be in this area here. I've also added this what I can only assume probably be like a storage shed of some sort for the brewery. I'm not quite sure of its real purpose, but probably make something of that. See how it goes. So before I take a look at the gauge shed itself, I thought I'd give you a brief history of what its purpose was actually for. In 1833, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, an English mechanical and civil engineer, was appointed Chief Engineer of the Great Western Railway. Brunel, who is considered one of the most ingenious and prolific figures in engineering history, who changed the face of the English landscape with groundbreaking designs and ingenious constructions. Brunel wanted to run a faster, larger and more comfortable railway for his passengers. To that he decided to build the Great Western Railway to a 7-foot broad gauge. Brunel was basically right with his theory, but he had a problem. By the time the Great Western Railway had built a few hundred miles of broad gauge track running from London to the southwest of England, there was already thousands of miles of standard gauge track stretching across the rest of the country. Where the two types of track both met, passengers and goods had to change trains, causing extra expense and inconvenience. With a mix of both broad gauge and standard gauge meeting at various locations along the route, change of gauge sheds were built for dry undercover transfer of either goods or passengers, and a small number of these particular sheds still remain intact today and can be seen in various locations. A parliamentary inquiry was held in 1846, and an Act of Parliament was passed restricting the broad gauge to Great Western Railway tracks only, covering only the southwest of England and Wales. This effectively was a death sentence for the broad gauge, although it took 46 years to pass away. In addition, the cost of converting lines from a standard gauge to broad gauge would have been huge. Tunnels, bridges, stations, cuttings and embankments would have all had to have been enlarged. In contrast, standard gauge trains would always fit on lines built for broad gauge. The Great Western Railway gradually changed their tracks over the years, with many of their lines having a third rail, so trains of both sizes could both run. By 1892, only the final section of the line to Penzance, running through Devon and Cornwall, was broad gauge only. With broad gauge now in terminal decline, the Great Western Railway eventually bit the bullet and sought to eliminate it completely. In addition, a multiple of broad gauge sidings were laid on spare land at Swindon for use as a dump for redundant stock. Finally, in the early hours of Saturday the 21st of May 1892, the last broad gauge train service left the West Country, this being the Paddington-bound Night Mail. Over that weekend, 5,000 navvies undertook the gruelling task of converting 106 route miles of line to standard gauge. From Monday the 23rd of May 1892, all services on the Great Western Railway main line were completely converted to standard gauge, and all trains were running as standard gauge. So the main structure of this was built using a 2mm grey board that I got from Scale Model Scenery. Now the front part where you've got the arches, obviously you've got this section here, then you've got the inner brickwork. So the actual build method for that was to double up the card, which was then completely cladded with Slater's brick plasticard. Now for the actual arches themselves, these are actually made buy wheels kits, and you normally buy the actual arch kits which come on these sprues. Now they're actually done so the outer larger ones are normally sort of up to 3 courses, and then you've got a medium size made up of 2 courses, and the same again for a smaller one which are made up of again 2 courses. So what I've done is I've used the smaller ones but actually trimmed those down into 2 halves, so quite a painstaking job to separate the two. And I've used the smaller one which is on the insert where the window is on the inner part of the arch, and then the larger one of the two which fits on that section there. To actually get the actual arch on the actual main plasticard bricks, what I did was I actually measured out a whole section, then actually laid masking tape over the top of it, and then tried to find the pinpoint of where the centre of each arch was going to be. Then actually used a flat drill bit to drill through every so often, so it gives me a persistent arch all the way along. Quite tricky and plenty of calculations to do, but I found that the flat bits did a really good job of giving me a nice clean cut on these Slater's brick cards. Now when it comes to the brick finish that I've picked to do all this with, the actual arches themselves have been picked out with a grey which is exactly the same colour as the roof, just a Humbrol acrylic match, round match type paint was used on those. The rest of the actual brickwork I've used the same method what Paul Chapman over at Galgorm Hall had done, which was the matte 85, which is the rust colour by Revel, and the matte 83 for the actual sort of brown tones to the brickwork. I've done nothing different to how he applied it. I did it to the exact method what he did. If you haven't checked out how he's done it, do pop over to Paul's channel and have a look, and I'll leave a link to that method down in the video description. Now for the mortar, for all the joints in the brickwork, I've used Vallejo pigments, which is desert dirt or desert dust, and this was mixed with Vallejo's acrylic varnish, and I'll do that as quite a thick sort of mixture, so it's quite a gloopy sort of paint that you go over the whole brickwork with it, leave it to go off, and then just with a slightly dampened piece of kitchen or cloth in some acrylic thinners, just wipe over the surface, and that will take off the residue off the brickwork, then leave all the actual joints as you'll see here. The roof is made from Slater's again plasticard sheeting, which is the slate roof effect one that you get. Again, another painstaking job because you literally have to cut each strip and then lay the next one over the top of it and so forth. But again, I'm quite pleased with how the effect of those look. And these have just been painted in grey and just been given a dry brush of some white over the top for the time being. Now I'm going to weather these, the roof of this, to sort of create that used everyday grime that you see on most rooftops, and I'll probably do a feature video on that in the future. The shed's got the glazing in. This is just trimmed from some old packaging and some nice sort of sturdy plastic, and that's glued from the inside. At some point I will get all the glazing beads put in these, and probably use something like 0.25mm plasticard rod and just create the actual window panes or the framework for these. Should be a relatively straightforward job. Again, things like minor detail where I've got the gutters and stuff still to put on these, and also it's not had any weathering yet, so it's still yet to be completely weathered up. Now the whole structure itself is actually cut at a very awkward angle, so it runs in line with the actual back seam. And what I've done is I've actually cut this particular section out just here. Focus. I've just cut this section out just there, and that's as far as I want the track work to actually go into it. There's no need for the track to run all the way in because the majority of it is not going to be seen. I've also just added a bit of paint and a bit of the old platform that would have been in there during its time, and just given it a quick dash of paint and just grimed it up slightly inside. The concrete plinth that sort of runs around the roof line, that's just using standard 1mm plastic card, just cut into approximately, I think it's about 2 foot wide strips, scale 2 foot, and they're just painted in some kind of sand concrete-y type colour, which is like the real one itself. Again, this will be weathered down with the rest of the building. So we take a look at the corrugated add-on, and what I've done with this again is just using the scale model scenery grey mount board. It's constructed a skeleton frame, and this was quite a tricky one to do because there's no end support at all at this end. So with some extra sort of supports within the roof just to keep it rigid. And what I've done is I've cut Slater's plasticard corrugated sheeting into scale 10 foot by 4 foot sheets, and then obviously overlap them as you would do on the real thing. Now I've only overlapped them along this line. Each individual section isn't actually overlapped, as it would give too much of a bump, and it just looks a bit odd. Inside again was cladded. I did that in reverse to give the illusion that the actual cladding is overlapped on the other side. Obviously there's nothing on the back. And again just cut some thin strips of plasticard just to create the effect of a metal framework, and then just grime them up. I'm not sure how long the building itself was attached to the main shed, but I've managed to sort of look back at photographs, I think to about the 1940s, and there was pictures of this still attached. So it obviously goes back to quite a long time. For the painting methods on this, the brickwork's been done to the same as the shed. Now the corrugated sheeting, I was chatting to Bob over at N-Trains, who's also working on some corrugated roofing stuff as well, and sort of asking questions, and he sort of asked what would be the best sort of way to go forward, and I suggested using a kind of grey as a base coat. So he managed to rummage around in his shed, and he found a can of spray from Halfords, which is a industrial grey enamel, and showed me the pictures, and I was actually quite impressed by the colour of it. It's quite a really good sort of base colour to work from. So I've also used that on this as the base coat. So what I've done after I've applied the grey is use the acrylic spray, again from Humberol, or any kind of particular white spray is good, and misted over the surface of the roof from quite a long distance, and maybe stand back 2-3 feet away and then give a mist, so the actual mist from the spray lands and gives a dusting effect on the roof. That creates the illusion that these boards sort of then become looking a little bit like the asbestos sheeting. And then just using various weathering powders mixed up into sort of greens and greys and sort of tones, and some weather washes just to create some of the streaky that you can see. Now I've also given it a bit of a wonky edge along the front here by just trimming up some plastic card and popping that underneath. Now I've just cut that randomly, and the actual real thing looked like that. In fact, it looked a lot worse coming towards the end of its life before the thing was actually taken down. For the ridge, all I've used is a small sort of 6mm wide bit of masking tape and just stuck that on the surface, and that's been painted at the same time once the roof was all done. And again, like the actual gauge shed, this was actually trimmed to sort of match the run of where the back scene is, so this sits again at an angle, so it's narrower at that end and obviously gets wider down that end. And once they're in position, really pleased with exactly how they sit. Now the only thing with this particular shed is actually supposed to be another 3 more arches longer down this end. However, obviously I'm working on an area in the loft where I haven't quite got the full size to do an exact scale replica, so you have to compromise somewhere, and if I would have gone to the full length, I would have started to lose the ridge of the actual roof, which means that I would have started kind of coming down. So I've decided to just chop off the last 3 arches and just scale both of them down ever so slightly, so it kind of fits in with the scene. Now another little building I've been working on is a little low relief unit, which is a part of the brewery area. I'm not quite sure whether it's actually used for the brewery or whether it's a completely separate different building. It could be a storage sort of shed for them, but again, this is just using the grey board, and it's actually been cladded with some plasticard, and I will eventually finish off the roof and the body sides with some sort of weathering effects and stuff on those. So I've also spent a bit of time doing a few samples of track ballasting and weathering. Still a bit more work to do on these yet, but once I've kind of got to the point where I'm happy with them, then I'll feature those in a upcoming video, probably in the next video of the build series. So I've also passed another birthday milestone, and as a gift I was given this Helgen Class 33065 Sea Lion, and lovely little runner. And this particular locomotive was actually a regular loco down in Exeter St David's, so makes a nice addition to the rest of the fleet. So what's coming up next? I'm now going to be starting a little mini series, or the continuation of the actual build series, but there'll be probably 25-30 minute videos showing the scenery beginning to take shape, starting from the back area where the shed is, all the track ballasting, right up to roughly where the level crossing area is, just in this area here.